Okay, so we're a couple of minutes past the start time. I think the numbers of joinees are slowing down, so I think we'll get started. Just to let everybody know that the webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out the recording to everyone that registered and attended after the session, with a bit of a summary of the key talking points and the topics that have been covered. So we'll get started now. So look, welcome to today's webinar on the topic of law firm collaboration, the importance of data, and the impact of client intelligence in driving positive outcomes for firms. So my name is Alan Mercer. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. As way of an introduction, I've spent 12 years or so as a marketing and BD director for law firms before spending the last 6 years with Introhive, talking with law firms around the topics of how to leverage client intelligence and relationship capital to drive growth and improve the value of CRM systems. And today for our session, I'm joined by 3 industry veterans who are all sort of more capable of introducing themselves than I am, and they shall do so now. So starting with Jo, then Mike and Giles, if you'd like to introduce yourself and say hello.
Thanks, Al. I'm Jo Cooper. I have 20 years experience working in M&BD in law firms. I don't feel like I should be called a veteran, but that's quite a depressingly high number of years that I've been doing this. And I'm currently global head of M&BD operations at the brilliant law firm Simmons Simmons, where I've been for almost 8 years. I've got a very varied role, but my primary focus is to be the conduit between M&BD and the wider business, and particularly around the business services functions, to help us collectively deliver projects and processes that make us more efficient and ultimately drive revenue.
Welcome, Jo. Mike.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Anastasiades, Legal Industry Director with Hike2. Hike2 provides advisory services and solutions with a focus in legal. And we count as our clients, law firms, corporate legal departments, companies, well, of course, with corporate legal departments. I'm having conversations, 2 or 3 conversations really every week, and seemingly increasing in the last 2 months or so with law firms around digital transformation, around artificial intelligence, around data. So many different topics to pick off. Prior to Hike2, I was at Salesforce for about 10 years. While at Salesforce, helped to stand up their legal industry vertical. And then prior to Salesforce, I was at a law firm in Boston, Massachusetts for about 6 years. Really excited, Al, about today's session. And maybe I can verbally pass this over to Giles.
Cool. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Giles Daubeny. I'm Global Head of Client Service and Insight at Bird & Bird, which is an international law firm. I've been with the firm just over 4 years. I am indeed a vet because I've spent 25 years in various professional services organisations, from consultancy to accountancy and big law. And I guess at Bird & Bird, my job in a nutshell is to help the business win and keep and grow profitable client relationships. And I wear 3 hats, really. I lead the firm's global strategic client program. I head up our client listening function, and I own our CRM system. And I guess the strand which links all of those things together is data. So whether it's client or whether it's market or relationship insights and intelligence, that is what I'm here to deliver to the firm.
Well, you're on the right webinar, Giles. Thank you for joining. Thank you to Jo and Mike. So look, before we get stuck into today's topic, and this was a last-minute curveball for the panelists, I thought we'd start with a little icebreaker. I thank them for taking time out of their busy work schedules to join us today. I just wanted to figure out actually how busy are they? How busy is a working day? So a good test of this, which I'd like to ask the speakers, is what time do you set your alarm on the average work day? And how long after opening your eyes do you pick your phone up and start checking your work emails?
Shall I kick off, Al? So I haven't set an alarm clock for 9 years since I bought a human alarm clock into my life, who doesn't share mine and my husband's fondness for laying in late. So yeah, I haven't set an alarm clock since he was born. He is an early riser. Thankfully, the 5:30 a.m. starts have finished, so it's a bit more of a manageable time. In terms of checking my emails, I make a conscious effort not to put my phone in my bedroom, so I don't do it immediately when I wake up. I do, as we've spoken about before, I do wake up and look at TikTok because I'm obsessed with TikTok. So I don't tend to look at my phone until I go downstairs and I make a cup of tea in the morning, which I actually don't love about myself, and I wouldn't encourage for any of my team to do that, but I do like to just have a look and see what's coming overnight and what the day is going to look like. But I always make an effort not to respond to anything unless it's somebody in a different time zone where I think that's okay to respond. Go do the school run, come back and get into the day then.
Fairly disciplined then. And Mike, are you a workaholic first thing you do, or?
Well, I don't think, I mean, it's just everyone is busy with many different, things. So 5:30 is my answer, Al. But I like to get up early. I actually, I'll go to bed early so I can get up at 5:30. And in terms of, I don't really check my email on my phone when I wake up. What I'll do though is I'll wake up, and for the first 45 minutes to an hour, I'll work. I'll crank through those emails. I'll get to some stuff I probably missed yesterday just to set myself up from the day. Then I'll go downstairs, have breakfast, let the dogs out, all that stuff, and really kind of get going with my day.
Great stuff. And Giles?
And I sympathise hugely with Jo. My alarm goes off at 6 every day. I've got 2 kids of school age, so my priority, I guess, is getting them up and moving, which is a challenge, and getting them towards the front door for about 7. And that is a real feat sometimes. If I'm working from home, I'll probably log on at about 7:30ish. But if I'm on the train coming into the office, which is happening more and more, I'll use the commute as an opportunity to check emails and obviously start responding on my way into work. So I guess any time from 7:30, 8, something like that. But I'm a morning person, so actually it's not a hardship for me.
Great stuff. So the power of technology, they're always at work. It's a blessing and a curse being able to respond to work outside of work hours. So no, thanks for that. So look, on to the topic for today, just to set the scene. And we will have time for questions at the end, so please post them in the chat as we go. So to set the scene then, today's webinar, we're going to discuss the role of centralized client data and how that can enable firm-wide collaboration, provide a strategic approach to client management. So we're going to delve into, first of all, why collaboration is vital, or is it? Identify some of the common challenges and barriers to collaboration across the firm and data sharing, and then examine the role of client data and relationship data specifically. And in sort of 2024, a webinar wouldn't be a webinar unless AI got a mention. So we will be asking our guests for their thoughts on how AI can enhance internal and external collaboration in law firms, and finally discuss some practical ways to centralize data for a more integrated and cohesive approach to client relationship management. So starting with collaboration, there's been several recently released reports, including one from ourselves at Introhive and also our friends over at Thomson Reuters, and other research such as the work of Heidi Gartner, which have all outlined how improving the way firms collaborate has the potential to be a huge engine for growth. Improved collaboration has been shown to lead to more work build, higher value matters, fostering a more innovative and cohesive firm culture, alongside enhancing the firm's reputation and increasing the likelihood of gaining future work. So I don't believe that any of the panel or our audience would argue that improved collaboration internally and with your external network will negatively impact a firm's overall success and financial performance. But let's dig into this. So for the panel, in your experience, how crucial is collaboration within a law firm, and why? And let's start with Giles there.
Well, as you say, Al, it is absolutely crucial. So collaboration, I think, in all its forms, whether it's internal with our own colleagues and peers in our organisations, or externally, with our clients, is it's essential because it's about how we can get the very best outcomes. So that's great outcomes for the firm, just as you've described. But I guess for me, more importantly, it's about great outcomes for our clients. And I think that's because increasingly what we're seeing is, our clients' sort of most complex legal problems can't always be solved by the brilliance of our lawyers on their own. And so we need to bring the whole firm to the client in order to collaborate together to find that best solution. So, more and more of our client service teams are truly multidisciplinary, with our lawyers obviously at the core, but sort of supported by a wider group of multidisciplinary, multi-skilled business professionals who are client facing. So whether that's CRM managers, whether that's legal project managers, legal technologists, data scientists, billing professionals, the list goes on. They all have a really important part to play in delivering the very best solutions for our clients.
Yeah, and Jo, would you concur or anything different to add there?
No, I completely agree, but I also think I think it speaks to the culture of the firm, and ultimately, I mean, we talked about clients, but I think if you're working somewhere where that has a collaborative culture, it also makes the individuals that are working in that firm happier, more likely to work a bit harder, to sing the praises of the place that they work for. Simmons is a really collaborative place, but I've worked in other companies where it's been less so, and you need a piece of information or you need some help from somebody, and you go and you ask them for that, and the answer is, well, why do you need that? That's mine, or I'm not sharing that with you, and everything just becomes a lot more difficult. Whereas when you work in a firm that is really collaborative, like, at Simmons, it's kind of like, oh yeah, sure, I'll get that for you, and also we've got this project that's running over here, do you want to get involved in it? But it just makes it a happier place to work. You build those connections internally too, and then as Giles has said, we all come together to deliver better outcomes for ourselves, but also for our clients.
Yeah, and touching on the client side of things, then, when looking at collaboration from a client's perspective, why is it important to them, and how does it impact their experience or their journey with the firm the most? What's the outcome for them of improved collaboration?
So I think clients really, I don't think, we know because they tell us, don't they, that they really want law firms to be their business partner. They don't want generic advice or generic sales and marketing approaches. They want to work with companies that really understand them, their businesses, and their challenges. And if we this is a bit of a random example, bear with me, but if you think about from yourself, if you were going to, I don't know, buy a new kitchen, as an example, and you're looking for a supplier or a builder to work with you, you want somebody that's going to sit down with you and say, okay, what are your challenges with your current kitchen? What are you looking for in a new kitchen? What's your budget? What are your time scales? And then they deliver something that works for you, as opposed to another company that comes along and just plogs in what they think is best based on their experience with other clients. And if we kind of take that example and replace it with a law firm working with a large multinational company, the firms that are going to deliver the most successful outcomes are going to be the ones that can harness all of that relationship background across all of their practices and jurisdictions. So what do we already know about their challenges from working with them holistically? Are there any relationship issues? Do we need to take some people off the team, add some new people on? What's going well? Where might we want to correct our course? So it's dual-sided, I think. There's the internal collaboration piece of pulling all of that information together so that whoever's going to meet with a client or work with a client can go armed with all that information. And then there's the collaborative approach of working with the client themselves, and it all comes together nicely in kind of a utopian ideal.
Like it was planned.
Just as that, I agree completely. I think, ultimately clients don't want us to do a project to them and impose that sort of off-the-shelf solution that's worked elsewhere. They really do want to work with us to come up with the right solution which really meets their their needs. I think that's obviously in the context of legal work, but we're also seeing, I think, more collaboration beyond the law. So it might be on issues where, you know, we and our clients are on a bit of a journey. So that might be, you know, in relation to legal tech and obviously AI, or it might be in the DE&I space. You know, these are things that we're all grappling with. We're trying to make sense of, and actually working together with our clients is a really nice way of certainly deepening our relationship, but ultimately moving forward together again to come up with the right outcome. So I think that's an interesting thing that I've seen in the last couple of years really come to the fore.
Great. And one more question on the topic of collaboration before we look at some of the barriers and challenges that you've encountered to making this effective. You know, if there's the old saying, if you can't measure something, then how can you manage it? So how do you define effective collaboration? You know, what is effective and what isn't? And how do you define this within your firm? You know, is it measured? How is it measured? And I guess, what does good look like, and how do you know?
I can have a go at that one. I mean, at Bird & Bird, which sounds very similar to Simmons in many respects, you know, collaboration is very much in the firm's DNA. So that means that, you know, we're really collegiate. You know, we've got a very strong one firm culture. You know, we really respect and we value difference. I think that's important. But if that's sort of the softer side, if you were, of collaboration, there is a harder side in the context of business development, and that means you know, having a culture which recognises and rewards positive collaboration around relationship management, around work proliferation, around you know, work winning, and so on. And at Bird & Bird, we definitely measure all of those things. But I think, you know, rather than sort of pulling back the curtain completely, I'd actually probably point you to another really interesting piece of research, Al, which I'm sure a lot of people have read, which is something I saw in Harvard Business Review last year called "What Today's Rainmakers Do Differently," and that's a really insightful piece, which looks in detail about, you know, how to measure collaboration in relation to business development in particular. So there are some really nice examples in there, some of which I've seen working in practice over the years, like self-evaluation and putting together self-evaluation memos, which is an expectation of partners in some organizations. You know, activity recording and reporting, other sort of incentivization sort of techniques and so on. I think all of that harder stuff is really, really important, because if it gets measured, usually it gets done. So yeah, I think it's really, really important.
Yeah, excellent piece of research. I think it was DCMI Insights, and we're all striving to have as many activator type personas in our firms now as an offshoot of that report. So no, excellent research if the audience wanted to go and check that out. So okay, great. Well, you know, look, collaboration, it's important for many reasons, for internal and client satisfaction. Moving on to some of the bottlenecks and barriers to this, I guess from my own experience of working in law firms, there's a real complex mix of cultural, structural, and even personal factors that law firms need to address to foster a more collaborative environment. I think a couple of main challenges for me were around just not being able to see who we knew. You know, the firm I was in had sort of 700 or 800 lawyers, and very difficult to understand who had relationships with who. So if you wanted to collaborate, if you wanted to speak to someone about a particular client or a relationship, it was very difficult to understand who to go and talk with and collaborate with. You know, the all staff email, does anybody know anybody at, was my most effective tool at the time. And I say effective with a little bit of a wink there. And secondly was the billable hour target, which I seem to find just disincentivized collaboration. People were reluctant to share work around, even when very busy, because it meant that they couldn't record the time on that work, even if someone else were less utilized or probably even better placed to to instruct on that matter. So yeah, that's just my views. But question to the panel: what do you see as the most significant barriers to effective collaboration within firms today?
I could maybe jump in. It's okay. I'll just,
absolutely.
Giles just talked about this, and he talked a little bit about the culture at Bird & Bird being very strong, which is great. To me, that's one of the big barriers is the culture, right? So if you work in a firm that shares information between practice groups, you're likely in a good spot. If you work in a firm where people keep information private, don't share leads and information with other practice groups, don't share information just in general, it's going to sort of be hard to break out of this cycle. And the culture, when it needs to change, it needs to start with the leaders of the firm, the most senior partners, and it doesn't change overnight. I mean, you need to work on it every day, and if you don't, people won't be happy, they'll leave, business will suffer. I just think, look, it's the same for sort of almost, I guess, any business, but law firms, absolutely. The culture is critical. And to me, maybe one last thing, if you're looking to change the culture, you really need to be prescriptive, right? It doesn't happen by itself. You need to have a plan to change it and really sort of execute on that plan.
I'd echo that. I think culture is like the secret sauce, isn't it? Which sort of keeps people motivated and hopefully keeps our clients happy. There's that great quote, isn't there? I can't remember who it's by. I want to say Peter Drucker, but I may be wrong. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Isn't that the one?
He often gets misquoted as the source of that. Yes.
Oh, I got it wrong. Oh no. But I think there's a lot in that. I mean, you gave us a great list, Al, of some of those barriers. I mean, I would agree with you, and maybe it is a bit provocative, but I think you're right to mention the tyranny of the billable hour and the way that can sometimes drive a certain type of behavior. But I think related to that, and more importantly, is the fact that let's face it, fee earners have so little time to lift their heads and think about opportunities to collaborate more widely with their colleagues. And in my experience, certainly Bird & Bird, it's not that they don't want to. More often than not, it's simply they just don't have the bandwidth to do so. So I think that for us is probably the biggest barrier that we're trying to help them overcome.
Okay, so culture, 2 votes for culture there, and I think Jo, from a sort of a structural point of view, what sort of barriers have you come across?
Yeah, so we're lucky at Simmons because it sounds like the same as Bird & Bird. We are one firm, so we all work more or less on the same system. So even when we have expanded into new jurisdictions, they have come in and they use our systems, which is, if we're just thinking about CRM as a fundamental example, we are on one firm-wide CRM system. That's not the case for every law firm, and I know that there are a number of law firms who really struggle with that because that data is literally siloed in different offices and it's hard to get your hands on. Again, that comes back to culture a bit because I think those issues need to be resolved, but I'm also aware of some firms, again, I think through kind of mergers and acquisitions, who have ended up in different profit and loss kind of cost centers, and that makes it difficult to collaborate. I have heard rumours of some firms who would rather give their business to a competitor than give it to another part of their business, which is madness. And I'm sure that only happens in very few cases, but it's definitely something I've heard of before. They're really big, meaty, fundamental problems that need to be addressed if collaboration is the goal. And obviously it should be. We are stronger and more profitable when we work together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. So sort of, data was mentioned there, Jo, and CRM in particular, but just sort of double clicking into that, what impact does poor or siloed data and fragmented client information sources, different systems, different structures, people owning certain data. What sort of impact does this have on firm performance, client satisfaction, collaboration? And I guess all three of you've got some stories and ideas to share there.
I'll jump in very quickly, actually, because I think it relates back to what yourself and Giles have kind of been talking about time. And yeah, I completely agree. I think we underestimate the amount of time that's available, and from an M&BD point of view, I think I probably hadn't fully appreciated that not only are our lawyers having to do their legal work, and we're putting big demands on them to grow the business and have all those conversations and the lunches and speak at events and all the rest of it, but they're also having to chase down bills. They're having to work out whether their team are fully utilized, and if not, how should they. But there's so much other stuff that they're having to do. And I think if you're having, I mean, we've all been there where you need to find out a piece of information and you know that you've got to go to several different systems, or you've got to speak to several different people, and it just becomes a bit too exhausting and overwhelming, and you either put it in the too hard box and don't do it, or you do the bare minimum to scrape through. And we've also probably all been on the receiving end of that, where you have asked somebody to provide you with something, they've then not been able to find it, couldn't do it, couldn't be bothered, and then they give you half done, half useful information, or the opposite, too much information, and then put the onus back onto you to sift through it and find out what you need. And then that experience dents the way that you think about that person. And so if that's what we are doing to our clients, it is going to have a damaging effect on the person that they're dealing with, but also the brand of the company overall. No, it's
significant,
catastrophic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And any sort of examples to illustrate the sort of negative consequences of siloed data that you've seen in your time, or Mike, with your work across firms?
I mean, to me, it's good, kind of bring it back to basics, right? It's the inability to use data at the firm to make key business decisions, key strategic decisions, impacts everything at the law firm. I mean, that's it. I mean, and there's so many challenges facing firms today, right? It's competition from other firms, firms differentiating who they are as compared to other law firms. We're starting to see alternative legal service providers, ALSPs, starting to sort of pose a challenge, that, these ALSPs can be, maybe more technical, sometimes more innovative, can move maybe a little more quickly than traditional firms. And, client expectations feel like clients, of course, are getting more demanding, and as they should, right? It's, you expect the best, of course. And then even just, not just getting top people to come join your firm, but keeping top talent. That's a challenge that we're seeing quite a bit. So again, if I was just kind of bringing it back to the basics, it's going to affect all three of those. And poor data, really, in my opinion, it's just it can absolutely be impactful.
Okay, and so we've highlighted there how important data is for making data-driven business decisions. I guess staying with Mike, what are the sort of key applications that you're seeing data and technology play in enhancing the ability of law firms to collaborate, both internally and externally? What's out there now? What's being used? What are the common approaches for firms that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's various applications, right? What we're starting to see, and I think it's actually a really good trend, is firms realizing that they do have data in all these different types of places and different departments and different applications that maybe doesn't sort of talk to one another, and firms starting to realize we need a centralized source. Call it a data warehouse, call it a data lake, call it whatever you want to call it. It could be something like a Snowflake as an example, or a Salesforce data cloud, and there's many other great examples. But regardless, just centralizing that data so people within the firm have the ability to report off of it, to gain key analysis, and to really make better business decisions. And one trend we've seen definitely is sort of these companies, or these firms, excuse me, really building up their data practices. So hiring data scientists and hiring chief data officers. So I think that's a promising thing, a promising development that more firms should absolutely consider. But we talk to law firms all the time, and this is a challenge that they're seeing. I'd say of the firms we're talking to today, the data challenge is really a problem, let's just say, for about, I'd say, half of those firms that are looking for a solution and seeking a solution. And of course, we give them guidance, and we do give them guidance. But this is, I think, really key to those law firms and to their long-term success.
Thanks, Mike. And I guess with Giles and Jo, with your sort of BD and marketing and client-focused roles, with those hats back on, with regards to relationship data specifically, how can firms sort of gain a more complete picture of their firm's relationships? And I guess how are you using that type of data? Which of your teams are using it for what? How is it supporting key initiatives? Big question there, 3 in 1, I think. Yeah.
It sounds like a very leading question as well.
I do not know what you mean.
But I can answer honestly, and it's not a setup. Obviously, we use Introhive. We're big fans of the product, but it is massively useful. I mean, it's used, I think, it is used by our lawyers, but within BD, we're big users of it, particularly in advance of relationship meetings or pitches. And I think where we've seen it being really successful is when we're pitching, and you've got that lifetime view of the relationship across the firm. So it's uncovered things like recent interactions. Let's say we're doing a pitch in London, and we found out that we've delivered some training in Singapore for the client that otherwise we probably wouldn't have known about. But that means 2 people can have a conversation internally. We can then include that in the pitch to show the breadth of our relationship with that client. So it's very useful and well used within Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, same. We're trying to be a lot more data driven in the way that we use data to ultimately make better decisions in relation to relationship management and growing relationships. So the data quality point is just so fundamental, as Mike said, and actually using a tool like Introhive is great because it actually helps us automate how we maintain data quality and stay on top of client data that we're collecting in our CRM system. So whether it's changes in job title or changes in employer, whatever it is, something like Introhive can really help us. Another use case, I really like the pitching example that Jo gave, but another use case is around planning and relationship planning. So we use data to look at relationship health, sort of more objectively. So we can actually use data insights to help us sort of calculate relationship capital scores based on recency and frequency of interactions between our lawyers and individual clients or client organizations. And that's just really helpful in terms of unpicking who we know at the clients and how well we know them. And effectively that really helps us with the heavy lifting part of relationship mapping, which is a really important point when we're trying to understand where the white space might be within a client organization, or indeed where there may be sort of lonely client contacts that we haven't necessarily managed as proactively as we might. So actually helping us to really zero in and focus our targeting efforts on those individuals. So yeah, lots of really, really useful applications.
Great stuff. Well, I personally could stay on this topic for the rest of the webinar, but I'm getting nudged to say move on. So I think, I did promise at the start that we would touch on the topic of AI. So here we go. And I just think, 18 months into the sort of Gen I revolution, we've seen an explosion of tools and solutions appear. And it seems like every few weeks, the power and the capabilities of these tools is doubling. I note in the market, several firms have announced, huge projects seem to be going all in on AI, whilst others are perhaps testing solutions, not ready to commit and a few others are perhaps taking a more cautious approach, sort of waiting for the dust to settle before deciding on what and how to move forward. So we're going to talk about how AI can have an impact on leveraging your firm's data more effectively, aiding collaboration. But just before we did that, individually, just what are your reflections on this huge period of change, and what are your thoughts on the current AI landscape for law firms, and perhaps get a feel for where your firm sits on the scale of all in versus hold back, wait and see. And Mike, for yourself, perhaps start there. What are you seeing more generally on that sort of spectrum of enthusiasm?
There's a lot of enthusiasm. I still see firms wondering what to do, like, we got to do something with AI. What do we do? But that, honestly, over the last 3 months, to me, those firms are sort of becoming a minority. And firms are really getting their arms around this and sort of figuring out the best way to use AI to their benefit, to the benefit of their attorneys. And that's really, to me, it's the one thing we've seen sort of be successful is, what are you putting together? What kind of project or application, whatever it is, that's going to benefit the attorneys and something that they'll start to use sort of right away? Because if you can do that, and you get a couple of attorneys using it, and there's a bit of a groundswell, then they see the value immediately, and that project will get funded, and the next project gets funded. So I guess to answer the question, lots of excitement, and really firms starting to really figure this out over the last few months or so.
Good stuff. And Giles and Jo, are you all in yet, or tentative?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I joined a webinar not so long ago talking about future of law in the context of AI, and someone came up with this great analogy, and they said, again, I'm paraphrasing really badly, technology like AI is a steamroller, and you're either on the steamroller or you're part of the road getting steamrolled, which I quite liked. So I guess at Bird & Bird, we want to be part of the future of law. So I think that means we're on board
on the steamroller.
And yes, clearly there are significant risks, but there are which need to be managed and mitigated. But there are enormous opportunities as well, which we want to capitalize on for the benefit of our firm and ultimately for our clients.
Thank you.
We're probably about the same, and we are definitely all in. We're on the steamroller for sure, and we're lucky because we acquired Wavelength, which is our legal engineering firm, back in 2019. So we've got all the right people within the firm, and TMT is one of our core sectors as well. So we're advising clients, but we're also doing a lot internally as well. I still think it's incredibly exciting. I think having a 9-year-old as well makes you realize that this is not going away, and how quickly it's moving. My son is obsessed with AI, chats away makes all sorts of LLMs that he has long chats with, one where he pretended to be my boss, which was quite scary. But I just think there is so much potential, but it's as Giles and Mike have said, you've got to be cautious with it. It's not going to solve all of our problems immediately, and it's moving at such a pace. Cautiously optimistic. But I quite like, we've been doing some investigation around things, how it could help us within MBD, some of the things around pitching, which I just think is just massively interesting. Whether it solves all of our problems or not, it's a fun journey to be on.
And I'll lead the jury on the answer here, but I guess, Mike, you might want to chime in with the importance of good quality data for all of this. AI tools are fed on data, so what are your thoughts on firms being ready for the power of AI from a data perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's key, right? So, data quality, poor quality or even biased data could potentially lead to inaccurate results. Security, confidentiality, AI tools. Jo, I think, just mentioned, maybe some of the sensitivities. AI tools may require access to sensitive data, right? So maintaining data security is critical. You got to really put together a cohesive data practice, which really is going to help ensure that data quality. It's going to mitigate that bias. It's going to really, we keep talking about collaboration. It's going to promote collaboration among IT and the legal teams. So Al, I mean, it's key.
Great, thank you.
I think it's a massive opportunity, and I think there was a question that I've seen in the chat. I mean, I think this is more around tools and technology, but AI, large language models, whatever, even automation is only going to work if the data quality is good. So we all recognise that. I think this is now an opportunity to go to the business and say, well, your shiny toys are only going to work if we fix these fundamental issues. So I think we should look at it that way. It's a really good sell, because I've been talking about the importance of data quality for years, and a lot of people find it really dull. But I think this is a hook to get people a bit more interested in it.
Yeah, it's a trade-off, isn't it? You want these new tools, well, give us your data, or at least start collecting it. So I was going to ask about what superpower you would hope in the future AI would grant you, but we're running out of time, actually. I can't believe how quickly 40 minutes has gone. So before we go, I wanted to try and give some practical tips and takeaways for the audience. And again, Mike, I might be leaning on you a little bit here, but Giles and Jo, I'm sure you could chip in. So in terms, look, data, it's not a new problem. Poor data, missing data, unstructured data, it's been a problem and a challenge for some time. So where can you get started? What strategies can you employ to centralize this data? Where would we get started, Mike? Starting from scratch, there'd probably be 50 or so data sources. What are the key ones that we need to start looking at immediately, and how do you approach this?
Yeah, so we did some work recently with a firm. We took a very structured approach. Started by doing an assessment of their current landscape, and in this assessment we identified data quality issues, data silos across different departments. We developed a data strategy that outlined their goals, their priorities, and really put together a roadmap for data consolidation. And we established a data governance framework that helped define roles, helped define responsibilities, et cetera, for managing data across the organization. And look, change management, training, all kind of key parts of that process. We wanted to really make sure that there was a smooth adoption of these new data practices. So there's no, I guess, one size fits all way of doing this. I like what Jo said there, maybe towards the end of this, getting your data clean, getting the quality, getting it straight. It's not exciting, it's not sexy, it's not, but it's so fundamental to having important information and being able to do what your firm wants to do, gain more clients, get that brand awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. We're closing on time. Any further top tips on where to get started?
I think, and actually just looking at the question that's come in, I think it is hanging it off of other major things that are happening. So within our firm, we have some big infrastructure projects that are happening, and what's been really great is that those projects have taken a holistic approach. So I have to go to some sometimes really boring meetings, but it's made me think, okay, so you're making that change over there, and that's going to impact us over here, particularly in relation to CRM. And I don't think that's always been done. I think people have just kind of got a new piece of technology or whatever and plonked it in. So I think finding those hooks, those big projects that are happening, and trying to suggest that we look at them across business services to dig out those issues where the data quality is poor and get them fixed within a project is one way to go if you can.
So hanging it on another initiative, and that trade-off again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think a recognition that tech in of itself isn't always the answer. So it needs to support the right processes and ultimately the right people with the right skills. We're using AI already and have been for a number of years in various tools, particularly around contract review and due diligence. There's nothing new there, but it's how do you bring the power of AI, combine that with sort of hands-on review of legal documentation, that creates a more efficient process, which ultimately means, we can create more time and free up, our lawyers' time to spend on more creative, more analytical thinking that ultimately drives client value. So bring those three things together: people, systems, stroke processes, and the tech beneath it, and yeah, you've got a winning combination, haven't you?
Great, thank you. And here was me worrying that we wouldn't have enough questions or enough content to fill 45 minutes, and we've actually gone over. So I am looking at the 3 or 4 questions that have come through. I feel that we've perhaps covered those to a certain extent, but we'll dig through those after the webinar's ended, and perhaps get back to the people that asked those if we've got any shared insights or tips for them. So just to say thank you again to Giles, Jo, and Mike. Thanks for your insights today, and your expertise, your perspectives on this have been greatly appreciated. And we will end the webinar there, and let's continue as a group to innovate and drive positive change within the industry. Thank you ever so much again for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.